welcome to NAPOD, where we provide NA speaker meetings and workshops in a podcast. We are an ad-free podcast, and if you enjoy listening, please help us to be self-supporting by visiting napod.xyz, look for the donate link, and drop $1 or $2 in the virtual basket. If you're also in AA or have friends that are, please tell them about our other podcast, Sobercast. Sobercast features AA speakers and workshops in the same format as NAPOD. We upload a new speaker every day, and it's easy to subscribe by searching for Sobercast, that's 2 words, on any podcast player app, or go to Sobercast.com. Enjoy the podcast, and thanks for listening.
Hi everybody, my name is Leonard, I'm an addict.
Hey Leonard!
And it's good to be here today, another day clean. Got a Super Bowl Sunday, or holidays matter to me, but for some reason, my drugs always had a priority. I don't know what I'm going to speak about because I no longer try to figure out what God's will is for me. I just know when I show up and I'm willing, open-minded, whatever I'm supposed to talk about, I'll talk about. I come from a big family. I did the drugs at an early age. I overdosed at 16. I was molested as a kid. And the freedom in being able to talk about that, that was something I had shame with as a child coming up. And that was one of the things that drove me forward in my addiction. I had a lot of racism and a lot of prejudice in my life. And so at the early age of like 10, I was molested. And the guy tried to fuck me when I was 10. It didn't happen, but he tried. And I remember it happened, he used to have me do things. I remember one time, it was like, I'm not doing this anymore. And then he said something. I said, well, give me $10. So I actually turned a trick at 10. And throughout my life, I've always tried to, I was real angry. I was real resentful against homosexuals. I was like, my father was a Skid Row alcoholic, and I really, the pain I endured then, it was like emotional pain. I didn't have much physical pain, but the emotional pain I bear drove me into, that deep-seated need for something to fix it. And I accomplished some things in my life. I used to hang out in pool halls and pimp them. I was around a lot of pimps, and that was the thing to do coming up. And I got married at an early age, and I accomplished some good things. I wound up building a house, and through high school, I got busted as possession of sales at the age of 18. Me and my buddy was selling drugs. His father had a pharmacist. That was like a gold mine. So we were really making a lot of money. His father knew we were selling drugs too. My friend wound up getting killed when they tried to go into cocaine. His father went to prison. I got in a near-fatal car accident. I had overdose in junior high. I had like 10 minutes to live. I had taken some Seconals, and my thing was, wow, the more I take, the better I feel. So at that age, it's like more was always better. A year later, I got a near-fatal car accident. They thought I was dead. But I'm saying that to say that although the overdose should have told me, like, just stay away from it, and everybody thought that I had learned my lesson, a year later I was doing the same thing. And then at 18 I had caught a felony. So I was ready to turn my life around. I got married at 21. I went to the military. I studied. I kind of straightened up. I did a little weed and stuff. And got out, bought a house and did a job and career thing. And, I was a pretty good dad to the best of my ability. I never went deep into the drugs until a friend of mine turned me on some cocaine again, and it's like I snorted. But I was a functioning addict when I came out. I would get up and go to work, and I would hang out all night, but I wouldn't spend all my money. I never pawned anything. But I knew it got to the point where, I was really wanting to stop. And one day on Father's Day, the day before Father's Day, I was doing some work and some air conditioning work, and I saw there was a church, and right next to the church there, this is Watts, they were running some drugs next door. I'm like, okay, when I finish work, I'm going to go cop. So I thought it was some cocaine or some crack or something I could smoke. So when again, I told the guy 110, I got 10. I got to my car, it's like, well, this is PCP. It's like, I don't want this. I tried to bring it back. He says, we don't take it back. So I'm like, okay, well, I got to use it. So I took it home, man. I smoked it, man. I remember flipping out. It's like the day before Father's Day, man. It's like I tore up the house. And, I can remember taking a couple hits and saying, okay, I'm high enough, and putting it out. And then always going back and I'll take a couple more. And I remember, it's like I smoked the whole thing, man. I just went into a blackout. And I remember my son getting up in the morning and, the fear of facing a 10-year-old boy, man. I was afraid to come out of my room. And then I saw him. He looked at me. He said, I hate you. And that was like on Father's Day. And so I vowed never to touch drugs again. That day I stopped smoking cigarettes. I stopped smoking weed. I stopped drinking. I stopped doing cocaine. I stopped everything. And that's how I had done things with willpower for all my life. And I stopped for 3 months, with nothing. And I saw a friend of mine that I used to do a lot of drugs with, and he said, you want a drink? I said, no, I don't drink. He said, you sure? I said, well, I'll have one. And the next thing I know, man, I got drunk, and I couldn't wait to get back, and I was off again. And found Narcotics Anonymous. For a lot of years in Narcotics Anonymous, for the first 10 years, my life got a lot better. I began to accumulate some things. I began to, my business took off. The property and prestige was good. I was traveling, and I was, I thought life was where it was when you were clean. All the fruits were beginning to, were good. I didn't want for anything, and my marriage was falling apart, and it got to the point where, it was a divorce time. This was after 26 years of marriage, and so it's like I had apartment buildings, and I had, accumulated some other things, and during the divorce, the separation, I moved out. So it's the first time. I bought my house when I was 24, and so I had moved out. It was the first time I was in the apartment building, and it was really a strange, man. It's not a fear there, being on my own. Although I wouldn't share that with anybody. I wouldn't share that I didn't know how to go to the grocery store and just buy stuff, because I didn't know, because she'd always done that stuff. And being out on my own, and it was really a fearful experience for me. Anyway, I had a relationship, a one-night stand with this girl for 10 years. She lived up the street. I just moved in. It's like she was cute, real pretty. Found out she was a dancer. And anyway, we had a one-night stand. And as I began to live there, I became friends with the guys in the neighborhood and stuff. So 2 years later, she tells this guy that we had a one-night stand. And this guy's about 6'6". And my place was in such a way that there was only parking on the street, and he was directly next door. And I had come to like the guy. After that one night stand, we never went back. It's like, it was just one of those things. And the reason I'm sharing this is because now I get, where I thought I was at 10 years in my recovery was only on the surface level. And when I saw this guy, he used to, when he confronted me, he said, my lady told me you guys had an affair. I said, well, it never happened. And he was, breathing fire. And I'm like, damn. And so I go upstairs, and he started pacing up and down the front of my building, looking up. And the only way I can leave was come outside. And so I found myself trapped in my own mind and trapped in fear. I found myself trapped alone. And so I got a gun. Now this is a 10 years clean. I got a gun, and it was a stolen gun. I still knew some boys, like, I need something, okay, here. And thank God I had been seeking the 11th step. I've been seeking God. I had been seeking to do better. And I had a sponsor at the time, and he told me, he says, man, if you use that gun, then two things are going to happen. If you don't use it and he see you have it, then he's going to start carrying one. And if you use it, you're going to do time just because you're packing a gun. It's a concealed weapon, blah, blah, blah. So then, all this time, I was in a lot of prayer and a lot of fear. So then I really got the third step. I had to be willing to turn my will and my life over to God. And I remember sitting in my chair crying. It's like, okay, either God is everything or God is nothing. And so I prayed for peace. I prayed for protection. I prayed that, just to watch over me and keep me safe. And I remember those are very sincere prayers from the heart. And the way that my building was, it's like I had to come down my steps, and the streets were, he was right next door, so we parked on the streets. Now, all the time prior to this, we used to always see each other coming out in the morning, waving hi, and after this prayer, there would be times when I would just get in my car and he would walk out, and there was a time when I came home and I was parking, he was standing on my steps waiting for me. And I'm like, okay. I took off and I went and prayed, and I came back, and I just said, well, I'm going to go home and I'm just going to keep walking. And he wasn't there. There was another time that he was standing from my building, and I was parking, and I just asked God to, please just protect me. Because I didn't want to do any, I'm not a violent man, and I didn't want to do any harm to anybody, but I had a lot of guilt on what I had done to him. And I remember getting in my car and he was gone. And so this went on and on, until maybe a month. There would be times when we would just barely be missing each other. It was almost like serendipity, or it seemed like it was coincidental. But then I come to learn that, that's what the third step is all about. I had become willing to put all my trust in God that this would happen. And I remember seeing him one day, and I was walking to my car. It was like 7 a.m, and I had to walk about 100 yards, or about 50 yards from my door. And he was about 50 yards from my car. So we were almost like a triangle at the same points. And I remember walking to my car. It's like I wanted to run, but I didn't want to act like I was scared. So I tried to be cool and just walked like I was unconcerned. He started walking towards me, taking off his shirt. And it's like, damn. And so when I got in my car, he came up to me and I rolled the window down partially. And he says, man, I want to kill you. And I told him right then, I said, you know what, man? I made a mistake. And see, that's what I learned from a 10th step, and that's what I learned from doing, an inventory or doing an 8th step and a 9th step. It wasn't about that she was part of an agreement to participate. It was about my actions and my wrongdoings. And I was able to get real honest with this guy and tell him that, I just did what I did. I'm not the same guy I was 2 years ago. And I had made amends to him and was willing to. If he would have told me, you get out the car because I want to whip your ass, I would have been willing to get out the car. Because I was willing to do whatever it took to make the amends. And the freedom in that, a lot of my friends said, man, I would have never said anything. I would have just told them and denied it. I had to tell them, I said, well, what step is that? What step is that? So I learned that, honesty at that point in time was what I was compelled to do. I was compelled to tell this guy, my wrongs and admitted them. And I tell you, after that, and I just told him that you are a good man. It had nothing to do with you. This is my, I'm not the same guy as you. You would never do something like that, and I would never do anything like that today. And there's an indirect amendment I make now, is I won't ever do that again. If a woman's in a relationship, then it's like, you know what? I won't ever cause pain like that again. And so I began to see this guy, and it was to the point where we could look at each other and just recognize. I felt his pain, but it wasn't that fear of having to do any harm. And I say that because it took a while for me to really understand the principles of these steps. And the first step, we either grow through exhaustion or insight. And I found that in step 1 for me is when my self-will had run as far as it can go and I couldn't take it another step further. There was just nothing else I could do. Everything I had tried had failed. And so there was a way out, but I didn't know that. I didn't know that came to believe a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity. It took me a while because all the time, because I didn't have that spiritual integrity or that spiritual, I hadn't put in a lot of spiritual work, and I had done it on the surface, like praying was always on the run. And I really got it in the third step. I really got that, what it is to really surrender 100% of my life and my will to God, because my will was being to strong-arm the situation, to take control of it, and I just trusted that step, and it's such a powerful step because there was a freedom in that. Once I learned that there's power in prayer, that trust in God, even though I couldn't see Him, feel Him, or touch Him, that things came out better than I could have ever orchestrated. And so I began to go back to workshops, and like in the fourth step, I really started looking at all my behavior, and how did I develop this personality, and doing that introspective work where I can really take a look at myself on paper and see how I was, I've always had something that I was angry at or resentful towards, or something I tried to fix, or areas in my life where I was shut down, or I just, trying to fix it or trying to look good. And I began to see where I had done a lot of wrong to people, and where I had done a lot of wrong to myself. How I wasn't able to love myself, and I wasn't able to allow people to love me, or for me to love other people. And in the fifth step, it's like I had somebody I could share with, that I didn't really trust, but I knew I was willing to really let go of all the ideas I held on to that no longer served me. And in doing that, there was a freedom. I began to feel that I had begun to experience a freedom in life I had never experienced before, because I began to not really be concerned about what other people thought, and not try to fit in certain places, or I wasn't resentful against homosexuals. I began to look at them as like, every homosexual is not like that one person. And I began to accept people for who they were. And there was a point where, I remember as a kid, when that happened, I tried to later find out kill this guy, because he had a motorcycle that I tried to loosen the front wheel to, because he used to always go over this big hump, this big jump. And it's like, if I can loosen his wheel, when he goes over, I could just see him tumbling. But all I had was some pliers, and I wasn't strong enough. So I vowed that if I ever see this guy, when I get older, I know I can knock him out in one punch. That's all I wanted. I don't want to fight him. I just want to tag him one time. And a strange thing happened. I saw him. And to my surprise, I didn't have any resentments towards him. I just looked at him, and I was able to forgive him. Because of my inventory, man, it was like the resentment inventory. Like, he was always at the top. Him, my father, family members, always at the top, man, until I began to just let it go. And in letting that go, forgiveness is a very powerful principle, because now I can fill it with compassion and freedom and love and some other more positive aspects of life. So as I move into like the 6th and 7th step, and they call that, the lost steps, because what I found from my own experience is that once we get a little time, we tend to think that we are doing this, and that if we're not as vigilant in working out, totally going distance through the steps at a more realistic level of not letting the ego dictate to how we're going to look or how this is done, or just doing it on the surface level. So I really began to surrender in it. I really got into my character defects of like even not eating right, or even not exercising, or how I became conscious of my behavior. I really became conscious when I didn't want to do something, whether it was like I don't want to lie, or I don't want to do things I don't want to do, but I became conscious enough when I was doing those things I said I didn't want to do. And I found that over a period of time that I would say, I'm not going to do that anymore. But that's the 7th step. You see, because as long as I'm telling myself I'm not going to do it, I don't have the power to change me. And it really took me some time to find out that I had to surrender to a God of my understanding, to a higher power that would remove those character defects. And so as I became more conscious of, like, I don't want to eat donuts, and like I would say, God, this allow me to eat healthy today, and give me the power just to not stop at the donut shop. And I would find out that I could look at the donut shop and in an instant make a decision. Do you want to eat a donut, or do you want to not eat a donut? And I would say, I'm not going to eat it. And it's just that little bit of something that would always just give me that one little edge I needed to change. And that happened so many areas in my life that my life I became dependent on a power greater than myself, and less dependent on me. And I found out that I could take that as deep as I want to go with it. I could look at my life, and I began to aspire for things at a higher level, be more, increase my relationships with my children, or the courage to have a conversation about what's on my mind. And before, it would be like I was wrong, nothing. And those kind of character defects begin to weed themselves out. And we begin to replace that is a freedom that is really at the top of our logo. There's a whole lot of foundations, but the freedom is at the top. And there's different levels of freedom, I found. I was free at 10 years, but I wasn't into the 11th step yet. And when I found that, I had to start seeking. Once I had the insight that there was a God that was moving in my life, because I could look back and see where I was protected. I could look back and see how things began to work themselves out. And there was other times when I was losing my business to my divorce that I remember I had the opportunity to do some forgery on my job. It was a very expensive job. I think it was like $250,000. It was contingent on me having this bond. The job was ready to go. And my bonding guy says, my ex was like, she's not signing anything. I talked to my attorney, her attorney, blah, blah, blah. She was just stonewalling. It's like, I'm not going to sign the thing. And so the lady had said, you have 5 days to do this. And this was into the 10th day. And the bonding guy says, look, man, you can forge your name. Nobody's going to see it. I guarantee it goes in my file and it's done. Even my administrator at the time said, we need this job. And, you should go ahead and sign it. And I remember saying to her that, if I sign this, it goes against everything I believe in. That I have to trust that there's a God. And I had to learn to trust that God when my life was on the line. And 5 minutes later, the phone rang. And my attorney said, you won't believe this. She just signed it. So I was able to get that in there and deliver that bond. I told her I would have it on her desk by 4 o'clock, and it was like 3:59 and 50 seconds. And that's a true story. So I learned to start trusting this God, and I began to believe in more of that than I did in myself. And so when I got to the 11th step, I really started reading a lot of different books. I really was curious about meditation. I remember a guy named Lawrence. He used to call him Beaver. Beaver is a good guy. He was one of my mentors in the program. And I used to ask him about meditation. It's like, man, what do you do with meditation? He says, well, that's when God speaks to you. It's like, God, I'm thinking like the Oz, But, what I love about the 11th step is it's very specific. It's, we seek through a conscious contact with God, only for the knowledge is will for us and things carried out. So, what we do is we leave every thought behind when we go into meditation. It's nothing about what I want change. It's not changing conditions, not praying for anything different. It's not wanting anything, because I leave that behind. I leave that in the thinking process, and then when I go into meditation, it's just like being aware in the space that whatever God wants of me, I want to be able to know what that is. And what I found out in meditating is that opened a lot of doors for me. It brought a lot of inner peace. It allowed me to really let go of all the things that had been holding me back in life. I had a real bitter divorce. And one of the things I was committed to was becoming friends with her again. And so what I did, I prayed on that. When I did my divorce, my kids never talked to me for 2 years. And I prayed on that. And so today, we're best of friends. I mean, we call each other all the time. She needed to use my car. And so I recognized that just because the marriage didn't work didn't mean that everything that we had, the relationships we had to go down with it. And so where I'm at today, it's like I've had a spiritual awakening. My life is so good today that I never realized it could be so good. I pray every day. My meditation practice is first and foremost in my life. I don't judge people. I don't criticize people. I'm of service in a lot of different ways because I'm able to give something back. I have a very viable volatile business right now with 20 employees. I trust all of them. All of them are happy. I've gone to real extreme sports that I do. Jim and I, we used to hang out a little bit. Scuba dive all over the world. Jumped out of planes. I'm going to Costa Rica next week. And I'm looking to go there to try to do something to improve where I go. I want to build an orphanage in South Africa. I'm concerned about the AIDS that are killing people. I work with kids that are 10 who are already experimenting with drugs. I see the kids and, like I see little Leonards all over the place. My heart goes out to them. But I also know that there's a God running God in my life today, and then wherever I need to go, I'll go. Just like being here tonight, I left some real good friends watching the Super Bowl, but I've never turned down an NA request because NA have never turned me down. And that it saved my life. It saved my life. It saved my family's life. It brought me back to a place where I didn't think it existed. Where I thought that everything I wanted out of life was a little out of my reach. I thought that it worked for other people, but it didn't work for me. And what I'm most grateful for is, these 12 steps that are very, very powerful principles. Principles work in spite of whether I believe in them or not. It's like gravity. You don't have to believe in it. It just works. But what I did find out is the more I sought it, the more it sought me. And that the deeper I went into it, the more I discovered. And it's all within myself. It's all was bundled up in this beautiful gift of these 12 steps placed at my feet. We're real fortunate to have a fellowship that's built on spiritual principles. I mean, I've met a lot of people in my lifetime, man. I've seen people very wealthy and very miserable. I've seen people very poor and very spiritual and happy. And I find that, for myself is that, money is not a priority to me. When I lost everything in my divorce, the one thing I held on to was that if this is God's will for me, then I accept it. And I just believed that if it was meant, I was meant to have things, I would. And if I wasn't meant to have it, I wouldn't. But it wasn't for me to decide. So if you knew, I know what I'm saying, it probably doesn't make sense because I didn't go into a drug hog. Drugs are just a symptom that we're running from something. Drugs are a symptom that something in our life is not going right, whether it's rape, child abuse, physical abuse, abandonment, whatever it is, whatever it is that we're clinging to and claiming the victim. Drugs we try to fix it with, and there is no fix. Sooner or later, like they told me, every knee must bend to God. Sooner or later, whether it's through the first step of being totally powerless or through the 12th step of having a spiritual awakening, God is right where you are. And I strongly suggest that you seek Him. So I just want to thank Jim and everyone for being here. Thank you for allowing me to share with you how good this higher power has been in my life and the power of these steps. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Please help us improve our ranking so others can find us by putting a review on Stitcher, iTunes, or your favorite podcast index. Nawpod is ad-free thanks to the folks supporting the show with $1 or more per month. If you enjoy listening, you can join them by going to nawpod.xyz and looking for the donate link. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.